Well, hello again. This is Everett Triplet. Thanks for watching, everybody. I've got to give you an update. It's July 4th. Just watched a very amazing fireworks display celebrating our independence. Independence from the tyranny of England and the king and taxation without representation. But the fact of the matter is, we're approaching the time where we need a second Declaration of Independence because of the enslavement that we are now under. We basically don't have much representation about the taxation. This is the land of the free, the home of the brave, or so we've been told, and I do believe that, but it's more becoming the land of the fee and the home of the slave. And so another Declaration of Independence is going to be made, and it's against the banking systems that control the whole global financial system. And so we are going to see a transformation, a global transformation is underway. The attempt to enslave all of mankind is the New World Order and the global government that's constantly been attacking the United States because, believe it or not, we are a nation at war right now. War is being waged against the United States, but they're doing it in a covert manner. They don't want us to wake up and know what's going on, but many of us are awake, and we're continuing to try to wake up others as well. But I was pretty sure this was the year that we would see the fulfillment of the prophecy where it says sudden destruction is coming upon unsuspecting people. It's the day of the Lord. Joel 2 describes it as a large and mighty army comes. I am absolutely certain that it is a United Nations authorized international law enforcement action coming against the United States, who has been determined by the majority of the world has determined that the United States is breaking international law. It's been officially declared by the United Nations. And so international law enforcement is what is coming described in Ezekiel 38 and in the book of Joel, the day of the Lord, an army coming from the north. And it's described as Gog, Magog, Meshech, Tubal, Prince of Rosh, R-O-S-H, Russia. And we're seeing Russia now has hypersonic nuclear-powered missiles. Putin brags about how nothing can stop them now. They go up to 27 times the speed of sound. Like in the days of the Old West, if you have a shootout between some big bad Bart dude who's tearing up the town and the local sheriff who has to stop him, who's got the fastest gun? Russia does right now. And so the time is approaching, and we are in a process, and also described in scriptures as birth pains. The birth pains have begun. We're seeing birth pains happening right now, and so that means the situation's only going to continue to intensify. Don't look for things to smooth out and get better as we go into the future. Quite the contrary. Expect increasing difficulties coming. That's what birth pains do. But never lose hope, because birth pains have a purpose. They bring forth new life. This is the birthing of a new age, a future of absolutely incredible prosperity, uninterrupted peace for 1,000 years. It's called the new millennium, or the new, 1,000 years of peace on earth. Well, who doesn't want to see peace on earth? But do you understand there's a price to pay? The Bible describes it. It actually says in Revelation 9, after it mentions an army of 200 million, which we know can only come from one, the majority of them are coming from China, who has now a young male population estimated at 150 million, according to Bloomberg News, which fits into other information I came across about no nation's ever formed an army greater than 10% of its general population, and they have a general population of 1.5 billion. So 150 million fits right into that 10% category. But the prophecy is immediately following the next paragraph. After it mentions the army of 200 million, it states that 1/3 of mankind will be killed by 3 plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur. These enemies are going to be completely annihilated in order for Isaiah 2 to where it says, never again will men train for war. Nations won't rise up against nations anymore. Swords are beat into plowshares, spears into pruning-hooks. Those are implements of agriculture. War is going to be a thing of the past. But it's time to declare our independence from the global government and from the global bankers who own and control the Federal Reserve and have it called the global reserve currency, the petrodollar, which is failing, which is being constantly inflated, which is why gold is going higher, which is why Revelation 3:18 tells you, word for word, I counsel you to buy gold refined in the fire, so that you may become rich. Gold is going to become recognized as the most valuable source of wealth that you can hold. And that's why Russia and China, the governments of the world, are accumulating rapidly tons, hundreds of tons of gold. Look it up. Just type into Google, who's got the most gold, what government? Russia, China, the governments of the world are accumulating massive amounts of gold. I tell everybody, maybe we ought to pay attention to what they're doing. Maybe they're smarter and have insider information the rest of us may not be privileged to have. But hey, follow their example and they're not making a mistake. And neither will you be. So, at any rate, because we are now into July and the prophecies talk about when summer's near, it's at the door, it being the sudden day of destruction, the day of the Lord where the sun is darkened and the moon doesn't give its light, which is a new moon, no light from the moon. And so we just had the 4th of July. It's awesome. Take a big sigh of relief. This year wasn't the year that it's coming. You have another 11 months at least. And so keep preparing because we have examples of what we should be doing. One of them is the Pharaoh who had the dream about the 7 fat cows that were eaten by the 7 skinny cows and the 7 bumper crop, heavily laden grain stalks that were consumed by 7 drought-stricken, pathetic-looking grain stalks. Joseph explained to the Pharaoh that God was showing the Pharaoh the future, that there would be 7 abundant years preceding 7 years of famine to follow. Now, when I saw videos in Florida of this one farmer, his name was Allen, I think it was Paul Allen, he said, we've lost 4 million pounds of green beans, 5 million pounds of cabbage. My neighbors lost 10 million pounds of tomatoes. I said to myself, this is a lean year. The food supply is being destroyed. It's going to happen. It's got to happen this year. The meat processing plants were shut down. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of heads of fattened hogs were being killed and put in trenches and buried. There was nowhere to take them to market. Things are just going crazy, but apparently this is still an abundant year. We still have grocery store shelves full of all kinds of anything you want, as much as you want. And then I realized a farmer who's losing 4 million pounds of green beans, that's because there's such an abundance of them. They were oversupplied. Because in a healthy economy, you have a balance between a supply and demand. But along came the virus, which we know is a tool being used to destroy our country. But when the virus came along, the farmers had already committed to planting. They didn't realize the demand was going to be cut in half, and they were going to close down the restaurants and the schools and international airports and the fuel supplies. The fuel off of the West Coast, 31 tankers I counted in one picture, said they've been circling for weeks waiting to unload it, costing $100,000 a day. And we have such an abundance. This is an excessive amount greater than was demanded because the demand dropped off. But now we're seeing the supply. The suppliers, they're being destroyed. They can't recover. This kind of destruction, they put their heart and soul into producing millions of pounds of beans and cabbage and tomatoes, and now They're burying it all and dumping it and just it's economic devastation. They're not going to be planting next spring. I believe next spring is going to be the beginning of the first of 7 years. I mean, it could be. But for one reason, we're told in these end times that when you see nations rise against nation, global hostility, it's the beginning of the birth pains. Well, so we know the birth pains are going to do what? They're going to intensify as the process proceeds forward. Birth pains get more difficult, and they will not stop till the process is complete. But hold on to hope, knowing that it's the birthing of the kingdom of heaven is coming to this earth. That 1,000 years of peace on earth is going to be the results of these birth pains. And so there's a price to pay for world peace. There's a path that leads to world peace. The path is called the war path. There's not going to be peace till all of our enemies are completely annihilated, totally destroyed, and that is who a third of mankind is. That's who they are. They're all of our enemies. They're the Antichrist. They're children of the devil. As a matter of fact, it's in Matthew 13, where a simple little story says an owner of a field sent workers out to plant the seeds, and when it began to sprout and come up, there were weeds growing with the wheat. And the workers said, "What? Did you not give us good seed?" And the owner says, "An enemy has done this." And they said, "Well, should we not begin pulling up the weeds?" And they're instructed, "No, let them grow together until the time of the harvest. You don't want to pull up the weed next to the wheat and uproot the wheat and damage it." Then the story is explained in Matthew 13 that the enemy who sowed the bad seeds is the devil. The wheat represents the children of the kingdom of heaven. The weeds represent the children of the devil. And it says when it's harvest time, the workers are given instructions. First, gather the weeds into bundles to be burned. Then put the wheat into the barn. Okay, so the barn being the new millennium, the weeds being the third of mankind being killed by fire, smoke, and sulfur, which is nuclear annihilation. Read about it in Revelation 15. John stood by what he says looks like a sea of glass mixed with fire. And standing by the sea of glass are those who have been victorious over the beast. That's the army of 200 million. Ask yourself, how much effort and expense would be involved in forming, organizing, mobilizing, equipping an army, training an army of 200 million? Are you kidding me? A few years ago I saw a billboard near a military town that said 1.4 million boots on the ground, army strong or whatever. I go, we think we're big and bad. We have an army of 1.4 million. Here's prophecies describing an army of 200 million. I go, oh my goodness. Why would anyone want to go to the tremendous effort to form an army of 200 million? I go, you know what? It could only be for one purpose. It's to completely establish total global domination. Take over the world. And the beast is described as having 10 horns. Horns are power. 10 divisions. You wouldn't put an army of 200 million all in one location. No, they'll be distributed, dispersed around the world in 10 bands of 20 million each. 20 million in Canada, 20 million in the United States, 20 million in South America, South Africa, Australia, wherever. Spread them all around the world. Global domination is China's diabolical plan. They're the children of the devil. They're going to die. They're going to be burned. John in Revelation 15 says, I saw a sea of glass mixed with fire. Standing by the sea of glass are those who have been, past tense, victorious over the beast. And then it says, they held harps. They're singing the song of Moses. It says, great and marvelous are your works, Lord God Almighty. It says, just and true are your ways, O King of the ages. Who will not fear you? For you alone are righteous, and your judgments have been made manifest, and all nations will come and bow down before you. See, this is Jesus' return in Revelation 19:11. If you have a hard time remembering that, it's a military Colt Model 45, 1911. It says, the heavens open and the sky appears, the rider on a white horse. Eyes of blazing fire, robe dripping with blood, with justice he judges and makes war. It says, has a two-edged sword in his hand. The armies of heaven are following him. It's on his thighs written, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. It's the best and maybe the most obvious description of the Jesus Christ's second coming. It says the kings of the earth and their armies fight against the rider on the horse and their army, and they're destroyed. So we're being given information about who the kings of the earth and their armies are. They have an army of 200 million. But what's lacking in Revelation 19 is the army of heaven is not described with a number or how many are there. But let me assure you, Jesus is coming. He's coming to save us from our enemies. You can read about that in Luke chapter 1. Zechariah's song around verse 70, 72. It says he couldn't talk for 9 months because he was doubted what an angel said something to him about the child that was going to be born. Anyway, he's mute for 9 months, but when he opens his mouth, as is his mouth, he's filled with the Holy Spirit, he begins to speak. He talks about the one who's coming that will save us from our enemies, rescue us from the hand of those who hate us. I go, and it's Jesus, his second coming. And then it goes on to say in Luke 7, chapter 1, verses 70, 72, he says, and he will teach them salvation through knowledge of forgiveness of their sins. I go, it's both descriptions of the first coming and the second coming are mentioned in what Zechariah is filled with the Holy Spirit and what he says in Luke chapter 1. It's all based by Scripture. Everything I'm telling you is based by Scripture. It fits together. It's logical. It's common sense. We're being outnumbered today. In today's world, an army of 200 million can form among the nations that don't like the United States. Those who hate us have got those kind of population numbers. The bottom line is we're in bad trouble. We're outnumbered. And when an army of 200 million forms, you can bet the military commanders of a military force that size will have the capability to do global surveillance with that satellite technology. They'll scan the earth from one end of the earth to the other. And then they'll come to this conclusion. There's nothing out there that could stop us now. With our army of 200 million, the whole world is ours for the taking. That will be a true statement. Nothing on this earth can stop them. But the prophecies are describing something coming. The heavens open and the sky appears, the rider on a white horse. Glory to God. The trumpet sounds. And here it is Jesus arriving with an army from heaven without any number assigned to them. We don't know how many they are, but I know this. Jesus is coming to save us, and he's not going to show up short-handed, is he? No, he won't. He's coming with enough to do the job, guaranteed. So, it says the people that know their God will firmly resist. I go, we're the resistance. There's a verse that says, when the power of the holy people is finally broken, then the end will come. I go, in other words, when we've done everything we can and when it looks like all hope is lost and there's nothing, I go, that'd kind of be a parallel to the story of the Red Sea, where the Israelites had gotten out of Egypt, plundered them, looted, and they were leaving, and then the Pharaoh and his chariots, that would have been the most powerful army in the history of the world at that time, are closing in on them with they have total confidence they got him now. They got him, they're going to destroy him. They're going to crush him. There's nowhere for them to run, nowhere to escape. And the Israelites are seeing that we're trapped by the Red Sea. But funny thing about that description in Jesus' second coming in Revelation 19 and 11, it says, his name is called Faithful and True. I go, that is who the Lord is. He was faithful and true at the Red Sea. Because with impeccable timing, he parts the sea at the right time to provide his people the opportunity to cross over on dry land, it says. But at the same time, the chariots and the Pharaoh's horses cross over, and the waters come in and crush them and drown them, and they're stuck in the sea. And God delivers his people. They don't have to lift a little finger. They watched. They stood on the other side of the Red Sea and watched that world's most powerful army at that time be completely annihilated by the hand of the Lord. Figure on this. It's going to be a replay. The same thing's going to happen. No matter how big and powerful an army of 200 million is, they're going to be destroyed. The Lord's coming to save us. Hold on to hope. Without hope, people perish. Now, what Joseph did with the Pharaoh during the 7 abundant years, so they put aside 20% of each of the abundant years. So those of you who have been having a mental conviction like I do to stockpile supplies, be encouraged and continue, because that's what Joseph did. They kept putting aside 20% of each of the abundant years. And that's what I counsel you to do. Continue to put aside as much as you can, because it says when the 7 years of famine came at that time, that it was so severe, none of the people could even recall what it was like to have an abundant year. They forgot it. They couldn't remember. So difficult times are ahead. It says, tell the righteous. Look, Isaiah 3:10 says, tell the righteous it'll be well with them. They'll enjoy the fruit of their deeds. Isaiah 31 says, a noble man makes a noble plan, and by noble deeds he will stand. Get out of the cities. Lot was told that by the angels. The judgment came on Sodom and Gomorrah. 2 Peter 2:6 says Sodom and Gomorrah is an example of what's going to happen to the ungodly. Oh, really? Specifically to the ungodly. Doesn't happen to the godly, just to the ungodly. How can that be? Modern cities are going to burn? Yes, they are. Why only the ungodly? Because it happens in the middle of the night, in the wee hours. It's coming like a thief in the night on that night. Anyway, cities' populations make a huge fluctuation. Jeremiah 6 talks about the army coming from the north, disaster from the north. They're planning to attack at noon, but the daylight fades, shadows grow long, so they change their plan, and they then make it a night attack. And a city at noontime would have a lot of people there. Shopping mall parking lots would be full. Same shopping mall parking lot in the wee hours of the morning, completely vacant, as well as high-rise office buildings and a lot of office buildings, commercial spaces all shut down and closed, nobody there. So God knows what he's got planned, and he's planning to protect the righteous, that the judgment's coming on the ungodly. And so the noble man makes a noble plan. Rise to nobility. Start planning what you're going to do. Because I believe a grid down is coming. They're going to take down the United States power grid. It is vulnerable. It is the single most effective thing you could do to damage and destroy and disable this country. Take away our power. And Isaiah 33 says, highways are desolate, no travelers on the road, brave men are crying aloud in the streets. Talks about the treaties broken. The treaties broken is the one between Trump and Putin that Reagan and Gorbachev signed. They both agreed that treaty is broken. Reagan and Gorbachev had a nuclear proliferation treaty. And so Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, in making a speech after the new year, you can look it up, he says, if a nuclear non-proliferation is no longer taken for granted, it's leading more and more countries to take unpredicted decisions with unpredicted consequences and the profound risk of miscalculation. Oh, wow. This is right after the drone killed Soleimani. Then the daughter of Soleimani at a funeral where over 1 million angry Iranians were attending, she spoke into a big bank of microphones, and she said, "There's a dark day coming on the United States for what they've done to my father. We will flatten their spider web." Talk about the internet that controlled the drone. Because the whole world now knows there's nothing they can do to protect themselves. There's no security available. Putin could spend the entire day at the Kremlin doing Russian presidential business. He could have a Mercedes with bulletproof windows out in a parking lot and be escorted at the end of the day out to the car with 24 armed guards on both sides of him. He could attempt to have all the security around him that he can possibly get, but it's not enough anymore. Now everybody knows that every anti-American global leader realizes they're all sitting ducks. Take any one of them out anytime this country wants to. And they can't stand Donald Trump. I'm going to tell you something. Donald Trump's going to get reelected. You know why? Because they're the globalists who are behind taking down our country and have been waging war against us with the virus, with the free trade agreement destroying our industrial base, which is why they went after our industrial base because of a commonly available statement about World War II said the primary reason the United States prevailed over our enemies was because at the time we were attacked in World War II, this country had a powerful industrial base firmly established. We could make Mack trucks, Peterbilt trucks, Freightliner trucks, Kenworth trucks. We could make Caterpillar tractors, John Deere tractors, Case tractors, Massey Ferguson. We could make anything. We were the world's leading industrial power. And it instantly converted into mass-producing military equipment. And so when you listen to the information I'm aware of, like the banker Paul Warburg, chairman of the Federal Reserve 20 years ago, said, around there, he said, global government's coming. You're going to have a global government. It's coming whether you like it or not. It's going to happen one way or the other, either by consent or by conquest. Well, these people who are so powerful and control of trillions of dollars and own every national bank on the planet with the exception of 2 or 3, they've understood from day one the United States had never going to consent. The only way they can achieve a global government is by the conquest of the United States has got to happen. Because this nation's full of the fiercest, most independent, freedom-loving people on the planet. Heavily armed we are. And this is the greatest government in the history of mankind. The greatest civilization. I just saw this amazing fireworks display in the little small town I'm in. I go, we are so proud of our independence and our freedom. But the day has arrived for a second Declaration of Independence on a scale bigger than the first one. It is coming. We are watching it. Get ready for it. Thanks for watching. Click like, subscribe. I pretty much just needed to make an update and tell you to carry on. Carry on, wayward son. There'll be peace when we're done. So the song says, don't you cry no more. Well, the peace isn't here yet. We're not done yet. Because if there's going to be peace when we're done, we're not done yet. There's a verse in, I think it's in Daniel. It says, war will continue to the end. I go from that standalone verse. I said, war continues to the end, and when we reach the end, war doesn't continue anymore. Okay, so it's talking about the end of war. There will be no more war when we reach the end. I go, well, let's hurry up and get there. What are we waiting for? God bless you. Click like, subscribe. Share this with your friends. Thanks for watching.